Hi all, this is Michael from Seagod and welcome back. Today is a very, very special episode. We are here with my father, Jonathan, for a very good reason, which we will go over in a few minutes. So, in short, we're going on a trip. And what is this trip? We are sailing from Ireland in Dunleary all the way to the north of France in Saint-Malo. The reason being that I wanted to get down to Sardinia for the summer. So this is in the south of Italy for anyone who doesn't know. And I was thinking about potentially flying over, but then I wanted to add a bit of adventure. So I was like, okay, I want to get down to France and I want to cycle through France because I've done a few big long cycling trips and then cycle from the north of Sardinia down. And so in the first place, I thought, all right, let me cycle down to the south of Ireland, take a ferry over to France, and then cycle the rest of the way, which was pretty cool. But then John here likes boats and likes sailing a lot. So I thought, how about we ask him, would you like to go on a trip from Dunleary all the way to the north of France? We didn't know where at the time because he was interested in the idea of potentially sailing around that area anyway. So kind of saw it as an opportunity, also an opportunity to get the trip started in a different way and add a bit more adventure and everything. Because I'm going on the cycling trip with my brother actually, and I remember telling him, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're sailing the first part," and he had a little bit of shock in the first place. Anyway, so that's the quick rundown on the trip. So before we talk too much more about that, I want to pass it over to Jonathan and let him introduce himself really quickly.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, this is fantastic. It's an adventure I wasn't really expecting. I probably think it's a good idea to let you know, well, how did I even start sailing? I come from a family who had nothing to do with the water except get into the Irish Sea on a summer's day, go blue from the cold, and get back out, or have a lovely walk along the beach or the promenade.
Yeah.
But in 2009, your younger brother had a birthday, and instead of getting presents, like all kids, they kind of throw presents away after a month or two of using it.
If they last that long.
If they last that long, we thought experiences would be a good thing instead.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, my wife Monica came up with the idea of sending Matteo on a sailing course, and then of course, didn't it make sense to send you both on a dinghy sailing course in Cortu Sant'Elena in Sardinia?
Yeah, the little optimists for anyone who knows.
Oh yeah, they're like the little bathtub,
Yeah.
total beginners,
It's a
etc.
box. It barely moves.
So I like the hot weather, but I also didn't really like just being, kind of quiet, sitting on the beach, reading or whatever. And the guys looked like they were having so much fun. I signed up for a similar course the next week.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was in 2009. That kind of started our involvement in the sea in a
Yeah.
completely new way.
We studied a lot more water sports in general. I
Yeah,
think.
well, very quickly then they moved up from an optimist to an open bic. You actually started participating in regattas all around Sardinia. Monica and myself started windsurfing. We did a course in that. She started doing some kayaking, and our involvement got more and more. And the one thing that sort of changed for me in that time, and that I really like about it, when I woke up in the morning before that all happened, if I saw the wind, I said, what a nuisance. Oh, God, it's going to be
True.
windy today.
That was huge.
And then after, having been a little bit involved in, the windsurfing, eventually we did kite surfing, we did kayaking. When I wake up in the morning now and I look up and there's no wind, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Boring day.
Yeah, well, maybe I
Got
could
that.
go kayaking,
Yeah.
maybe I could do something slow. But if there's wind, I'm kind of like, depending on the level of the wind, oh, well, I can do something. I can go sailing, I can go windsurfing, kite surfing, whatever.
Yeah.
So it kind of made getting up in the morning more exciting.
So for those of you who don't know as well, my mother is Sardinian, so his wife, right? And so we spend a lot of time at the beach in the summers because we go there a lot.
Absolutely.
So we had loads of good reasons to be near the beach. But honestly, for myself, and I think for you as well, that part was quite boring. So this really gave, being near the
Absolutely.
sea new life.
Yeah. Prior to sailing, the only thing I really enjoyed at the beach was if someone was going to play a game of volleyball or
And a fresh beer.
yeah, maybe that as well. Yeah, because it was so hot. And then only a couple of years ago, I came back to Ireland because we travel a little bit. And a friend of mine had a boat, and we thought, oh well, I'll go sailing with them. And it was kind of much bigger boats. And then I brought my different sons on the boats with them, and I really got a feel for it. And I thought, hold on, I actually like this.
Hmm.
Before that, I'd add in one little thing. When we were in Malaysia, we met a family who had been, an Australian family, who had been living on a boat for 14 years, I believe. And they're involved in recycling projects all around Southeast Asia. Happy to give a link to them later on who they are and what they do, because they do great work.
Hmm.
And they brought our younger kids, started playing with them. We went wakeboarding off the back of a motorboat. So the idea, the seed of, God, would it be cool to live on a boat at some stage, and ideally with your family. And so that kind
And
of
it's
idea,
possible as well,
it's
right?
possible, because I only tend to do things, not only, but it becomes much more probable when I meet people person to person that say, this is what I'm doing. And then it's kind of,
And make it real as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not just some fantasy or some idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. So slowly then I started taking the day skipper, the VHF, the first aid, and recently, after having the dialogue with Michael about this being a possibility, I got excited and I got nervous at the same time, because I have a certain level of competence, and this is also going to stretch that level of competence. So I was already working on what's called the Yacht Master theory and practical. So I signed up for, I signed up on cancellation for 2 courses. I didn't know whether I was going to get them. The Yacht Master
This
preparation
may not have
course.
happened had people not cancelled, right? So
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
cancelling.
Oh yeah, if someone's going to, if you want to do something, sign up for the wait list, because a cancel may come through. And I wanted to get in a certain amount of miles, so I was looking for what are called passage or mileage builders as well. And 2 of them came up at the same time. The Yacht Master Prep, which I did for a week in Dunleary, which was fantastic, really refined a lot of skills, learned a lot of new things. And then a round Ireland trip. So in 8 days, I went around Ireland with 8 people, the skipper, the first mate, and 6 of us, where I learned enough competence and had the practical experience to feel I can say yes to Michael now, and we can investigate the trip.
Yeah,
And
we
that's
can actually
kind
do
of
it.
where we're here,
Yeah, yeah.
because I now have the competence, the experience to say, okay, we can do it.
Actually, speaking of competence, just for people who are listening, they might not know. Could you quickly explain what the Yacht Master and what the levels there are? Just really quick.
Yeah, yeah.
rundown,
So
just to give
on
an
the
idea.
yachting, yeah, absolutely. On the yachting, the first thing you kind of, the first step on the ladder is to become competent crew. So that means you can actually know all the areas of the boat. Well, maybe not all of them, but the significant ones, to go out sailing with a skipper. He can ask you to do certain things, whether that is everything from, letting off the lines to go out, being part of hoisting the sails, being part of,
Any kind of job in there.
any job on the boat, winching in and out various things.
So no decision making, but the application of it.
Yeah, but then the more competent you become as a crew, you
course.
start, there's almost, you develop that team relationship with the skipper. So the competent crew is a really good first step. Then it moves on to the day skipper. The day skipper is where you start taking charge of the boat. Now, it's not for going out in the oceans or anything, but for, nearby shore activity.
For small trips, maybe
Small
like a
trips.
day or something like that.
But the advantage of doing the day skipper, that's the exact same as getting your ICC. Now, your ICC is your International Certificate of Competence. It's your driving license for yachts, and that's what you need if you want to. You want to rent, to go to Croatia, go to Greece, go to Italy. They will want to see your ICC to know that you have the competence to rent a yacht from them. So by doing the day skipper, that actually lines up with getting your ICC.
So for casual people, that's probably as far as they might even go.
For I would say 90% of people, that's more, more than enough to do whatever.
But you're not casual though. You want to do.
And then you
shit,
got to push
right?
yourself a little bit. Yeah. It's like, well, what's next? This is only getting interesting now. And I think what's great about the sailing community, everybody, they're having conversations all the time. There's always at least 2 new words every conversation you're in. And you start going down this rabbit hole of enjoying it more and more, whether it's about maintaining the boat, sailing faster, all of those things. So I found out there's a yacht master level beyond that. So those 2, 3 are the beginnings, and most people will stay there. But then is, well, would I like to sail across a sea or sail across an ocean? And that's when the yacht master comes in.
Yeah.
And there's, we say, more stricter requirements. If you want to go for the basic yacht master, you have to have done a first aid course. You have to have done a VHF radio course, and you have to have done a certain number of miles, depending on which level. There are 3 of them. There's a Yacht Master Coastal, where you need 800 miles. There's a Yacht Master Offshore, where you need 2,500. And then there's Yacht Master Ocean, where you need to be able to travel by sextant and
That's
using
crazy.
the sun or the moon and the planets and the stars.
That's crazy.
And you have to have done 600 miles, like well offshore. I think it's 150 or
So in
200
international
miles
waters.
in international. So fundamentally, you have to have done at least one ocean trip to even
okay.
qualify
To- yeah.
to sit the exams.
Gotcha.
So that's as far. Now I know there's even a level above that, which is MCA. So people who want to get on really big yachts and ships
The
and
mega
ferries,
yachts.
and that's different. I don't know enough about that yet, but that's a huge investment then
Fair
again.
enough. Yeah.
So
Well, then you're also deciding almost as a career rather than you're doing it for pleasure at the end of the day, right?
absolutely, but with the advantage of doing the Yacht Master, which I've to complete and look to complete this year, is you become commercially endorsed. You have to do it every 2 years, where someone could actually pay me to deliver a boat from one place to another, from
Which is
somewhere in the
very cool.
Caribbean to Europe, for example. So
Excuse to go on more trips. right?
yeah. But like it's like a super kind of enticer to keep going down that path. And whether you
course,
actually
yeah.
do it or not, because it's not my job,
Sure.
it's an incentive for sure.
But you would do it for free, I swear. So
Oh, absolutely,
I don't
absolutely.
think they need to pay you.
Yeah. But like, does that
Like, yes,
add-
give me a boat and go on a trip
yeah, and pay me for doing
and
it.
pay
yeah.
me? Nah, too much.
Yeah. So that's kind of sailing. They're
Gotcha.
the qualifications you can go
Okay,
through.
that's good. Just so you're working towards the first yacht master, which is the first step in being a serious sailor. In a
So
sense, right?
Yacht Master Coastal, I'm actually in the middle now of nearly to the mileage of offshore. So
Okay, very cool. Well, this
probably
trip will definitely get you the mileage.
it'll definitely get me much closer.
Okay.
So to get to 2,500, I'm over 1,500.
That's the second level.
So it was the second level, and the only difference, because the theory is similar, is the amount of mileage you have under your belt.
That's so you could skip it almost and go directly.
I
forward.
could, yeah.
Okay,
So
interesting. Interesting.
so that's a choice I'm going to have to make this year, depending on how much mileage I get done.
Very, very cool. Well, then, so we've talked a lot about sailing. I think
Yeah.
we get back to our specific trip. I think I'll let you give us an idea of what the exact trip is going to be. So, for a quick rundown, it's going from Dunleary to Saint-Malo, which I didn't know. So he'll explain why Saint-Malo. I just wanted to get to the north of France somewhere.
Yeah.
I actually really wanted to go to Mont Saint-Michel, and the only reason is because my mum has been on about it for years. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to north of France. I should really go to Mont Saint-Michel. And so I was like, can you figure that out? And
Yeah.
then you made Excels and stuff and all that. So if you want to quickly guide us through your decision-making process for our trip.
Sure. So I'll step back. I kind of did these courses to get the experience and go with experienced people to know, well, would I be in the right position? And I looked at, okay, well, we want to go from Dunleary to somewhere in the north of France. How long is that as one trip? If you wanted to go just straight from there, and where would you go? So first of all, I looked at Mont Saint-Michel because that was your actual destination. But it's so tidal there that I thought, hold on, I want to make things as easy as possible. And I looked at the sort of ports and marinas around that area. And Saint-Malo seemed to be the sort of relatively easier place to get into and kind of set up.
But still close enough.
Yeah. And so what that boiled down to was then choosing a route. That was sort of, I have a constraint. I would like to have enough fuel to be able to do it in case we didn't have wind or we had an issue all of the way. And the crew is relatively new except for myself. So I thought, hold on, I'm going to have to break this down.
The most experienced person beyond him is my little 14-year-old brother. I can't remember.
15 now.
15. Oops. 15-year-old brother, and he's the most experienced. He's
Competent crew
and
now.
everything. He's competent crew and everything. So the rest of us, because we're going with my other brother as well, leave a lot of desire for experience. So that needs to be taken into account.
Absolutely. And we may bring somebody else with us as well. I'm discussing that with people now at the moment.
Of course. Yeah.
So the idea then was, okay, well, if that's the constraint, 50 litres and plus possibly two 20-litre jerry cans, what sort of distance would that give me? So I'd be comfortable with any of the, at least from that perspective. But then the other perspective I wanted to take is doing nights and days is very different, and it can be tiring, and the crew is new, and people might not feel well or feel well along it. So what ways
we
going
don't
to break?
even know for some of us
Absolutely.
because of how new we are.
Yeah. So we're going to break it down, and the first possibility was go to the Scilly Isles, which is just on the tip of Cornwall, and then down to Samallow.
So
The
two steps.
2 steps. The second one was go to Kilmore Quay, which is just under the bottom of southeast Ireland, then to the Scilly Isles, and then to the Mont Saint Michel or Samallow.
Yep.
But then I thought, okay, well, could I even make it like smaller steps? Because I was looking at the hours. Anything over 24 hours, people are tired, and we're going to have to do watches, and I'll get into that like a little bit
Night
later.
sailing, I'm sure, is its own.
Night sailing is fantastic as well. You know, it you might be even a little bit weary about it when you go, but when you do it, if you get a bright sky, it's absolutely beautiful. So then I looked at, okay, well, could we go to Kilmore Quay? Where would be the easiest trip across to the UK? And it seems that Kilmore Quay to Milford Marina is the shortest trip. So that makes, because that's also a very tidal area.
Yeah. I'll put maps somewhere here, by the way, just because I'm not even sure exactly where you're talking about right now.
So you go across from the bottom of Ireland to Wales, effectively, Milford. And I thought, well, that's the easiest one to cross this, because every time the tide rises and falls, the sea goes north when it rises and south when it falls in that particular area. So for 6 hours is going one way and 6 hours is going the other. And that's a 14-hour passage or something of that nature. And so you're going to have two tides going different directions. The next trip then, what would be the shortest relative one? I didn't realize it, but the coast of Cornwall is quite tidal, and there aren't too many deep marinas. Not that we have a deep boat, like we've a draft of 1.85 meters. A draft means the water line to the bottom of the keel. So
you need at least more than that.
You would need at least, we'll say, 2 meters, and that's even like scraping the bottom. Ideally 2.5, 3 meters or beyond. So I was picking deep.
And what's a deep marina, by the way?
Well, anything that, for me, a deep marina is even at low tide, you could go in and out.
Okay, gotcha.
So, even at low tide, you could go in and out. Whereas a lot of marinas or harbors, you can only go in at the top of the tide.
Gotcha.
So the tide goes up and down roughly every 6 hours. So for many, you might be only able to go in the top 2 hours of the tide, which is 4 hours, because you have the rising side of it and the falling side of it.
So, quick question: would Bray, for example, be a shallow marina? Because I see
Totally
emptying.
Well, they even have bilge keel boats, which are these double keel boats, so that they hold stable as they sink into the silt.
Okay.
Whereas a single keel boat, like the one we're using, would just topple to the side.
Okay.
Now, it might necessarily, well, it could, I don't know. Nobody does it, because the bilge keel is what they use.
Try.
Now, a bilge keel boat will only go max probably 5 knots. It's max, whereas a boat that we're going to go on, like its hull speed is over 7.5 knots, which is the normal rate for it. So back to Penzance. Penzance, then we could even go, but I'm trying to break it down for crew and every other reason. The idea is to go to Salcombe, along the English Channel up the coast. Then from there, south to Jersey Island, to the main harbour there, St. Helier. And then from St. Helier to Samallow. So that became the journey that could take it in nice chunks. And then if, for a couple of reasons, for either work or for bad weather, we can stay in any of those marinas and have no issues. So that was kind of
and make it happen.
Make it happen. And
then it's flexible as well, as you were
absolutely
saying, which is, this is the plan, but as all plans,
if we do it in a relatively okay and everyone getting a bit of rest, it's 8 days, no problem.
Gotcha.
Going straight, like from Dunleary to Samallow, would be around 4 days something. Straight sailing without any
Yeah,
breaks, if
yeah.
you were. So
Which is a bit intense for a first time crew, I think.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to make it easy on ourselves, and I picked the most conservative route,
Gotcha. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, brilliant.
So that's the routing.
Very, very cool. Anything else I want to ask you about the routing? No, I don't think so. So what are, I guess the question is, aside from the routing, what are the other important factors that you look at? Okay, I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going to go on the way to get there,
Yeah.
but then what do you consider to
This,
get there, right?
this is a really important part. Now, we described the route, but there's then planning. It's called passage planning for the route. And it fundamentally boils down to 3 steps for every individual passage. Now, we're going to do 6 passages. So that means we'll be in 7 ports, like including our leaving port to our, and so for each one of those passages, you need to plan 3 things. 2 of them are pilotage plans. So a pilotage plan is how you exit or enter the berth that you're leaving or the berth that you're going into.
Berth, for those who don't know, because I didn't know, is the port, as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what they call it, right?
So you'll call it the pontoon, the harbour, but the berth is the actual individual parking space. If you had a car, it's the parking space within the marina, within the harbour. So if you want to get into that berth, now sometimes it's not an individual berth. You might be moored to a wall. You might be moored to a mooring buoy, whatever else it is.
Sure. But that's your berth, I guess.
Yeah, that's where you're going to moor to. You're going to moor to something loose or something fixed.
Gotcha.
Like at the moment, we're against a pontoon, which is a fairly solid marine berth. So you've got your pilotage plan, because the most difficult part of sailing is actually all the obstacles of going out and coming back into, because you've more traffic, you've more physical fixed objects, potential hazards. The tide it can often be stronger because you're against the coastline, and that's when the water speeds up and slows down more. Whereas out in the sea, you don't feel those effects as much.
And they don't matter as much, even if you get thrown around it. You might get seasick, but it doesn't really matter in a sense.
Exactly.
You're not crashing against any rocks.
And then the third part, where there are 2 parts but similar. The third part then is the passage plan. So you're going to want to go, for example, we'll take Dunleary to Kilmore Quay.
Sure.
Now, that's going south along the coast, and this is a very tidal region. So as I said, the tide will be flowing north for the time that it's flooding, and for when it's ebbing. Flooding is sort of rising and ebbing is falling. It'll be going for you or against you. So you time your exit of your marina so that you get if your trip is 6 hours or shorter, it makes an awful lot of sense to go with the tide. So it's one of the factors. Then you've got the wind as well. The wind could be coming the opposite direction to the tide, but one of the factors is the tide in it. And then it's
like a road moving with you rather than against you, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So what you do is, there are a couple of things. One, you'll look at the charts, and that has listed out the lighthouses that you'll need to look out for, hazards that you might need to look out, which they could be banks underneath, so there could be minimum depths, or there could be, in our case, there are wind farms, or certain rocks or whatever else. So you read the almanac. The almanac describes certain passages. You watch the charts, you read the almanac. You also electronically set up your passage plans in whatever you have. We have our onboard one, and then you have Navionics, etc. So that you're aware of all of the obstacles. And the best thing to do is, it's always the best, no matter what you read, is talk to people who've done it before and are local to any of the harbours, and they'll tell you things that quite often are in the documentation, but that's why we refer to multiple documentation. And anytime I'm going to a harbour, I call the harbour master and say, is there anything going on, or did anything happen recently
that you need to know about?
Because it mightn't be in documentation anywhere. So just call the marina where you're going, and then you get that
also
info.
They might have the little tips and tricks or whatever. If there's, for example, tides and stuff, it might sound really hard in theory, but they're like, look, just follow this little thing and you get through fine, and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. Like
The
The
locals are always the most
And
knowledgeable.
once you've been into any marina or harbour the first time, it's easier the second time. So it's actually just the first time. Like
Okay.
our first stop is Kilmore Quay. I've been in there,
Mm.
so now I know. You go in, you turn a sharp 90-degree left. You're going to go through a lot of fishing boats.
Mhm.
It doesn't necessarily look like a marina yet, but when you
Mhm.
get out there, you see the marina.
Gotcha.
It doesn't. Every one of them is
Mm.
different. So just
Mm.
experience it going
And
in.
from sea, sometimes you're like, can I see it? Can I not see it? I
Oh,
remember we were going
absolutely.
into Greystones and I was at the helm, which is giving direction, and he was like, "Go there, that's the harbor." And I swear to God, I had no idea what he was talking about.
Oh yeah, and like when you're going in, the colors red and green are really important.
Mhm.
Or going out,
Mhm.
red and green indicate to you if we're going out of this harbor, the
Mhm.
red should be on my right hand side and the green should be on my left.
Mhm.
That could be anything from lighthouses to buoys, and they
Mhm.
give you indicators. Okay, come through this
Interesting.
channel,
Interesting. Okay. Is
or
this international or is
this is
this
well. There are two systems. There's
okay?
the ILAB A system and the ILAB B system,
Okay.
and they're the exact opposite. So in
Oh.
Europe, we want the red on our right hand side, the green on our left hand side,
Mhm.
and the opposite coming in, we want the red on our left
Mhm.
hand side. And in America, it's the exact opposite. It's sort of, but then you know those
But it's the
systems.
same as well, because like you'd be, because either way, that's the space between them. So it's kind of one of those
Absolutely.
things that
But for certain boys, they've only one boy,
mm,
and that means if it's
you need to know then.
then do I keep to the right hand side, which
Mm-hmm.
is the starboard side, or do I keep to the port side?
Mm-hmm.
And if the color of the buoy is
Yeah.
green or red, you know which side to go.
Ah.
And then probably one of the more easy things is when you have to go in at a certain angle,
Mm-hmm.
many harbors have what's called a transit.
Mm-hmm.
So a transit is a guide for you to go in, and it mightn't be a lighthouse. It could
Mm-hmm.
be a church
Mm-hmm.
and something, maybe a particular house or a
Mm-hmm.
statue that's out in the water, for example. And if
Okay.
you line the two of them up, that might be the best way in. You just go around the
Mm-hmm.
statue and you go in, but they give you transits which
Mm-hmm.
are okay, follow this and it'll make you safely
Yeah.
into harbor.
Yeah, especially when you have a sailing boat, right? You don't have the motor that necessarily gives you the exact direction. It can be easier to just follow that kind of route,
Oh
I
yeah,
assume, right?
transits, and like even when you're sailing in the passage,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to keep an eye on the moon, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or a lighthouse on one of the stanchions, which are the poles that go up on the side of the
Mm-hmm.
boat, and keep them rather than keep looking at this compass here
Mm-hmm.
that'll keep shifting all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's changing, but it's reacting, and then you're reacting to a reaction. So
Mm-hmm.
you're two steps away from it. Whereas if you keep a constant
Mm-hmm.
transit between something in the distance,
It makes it much easier.
makes it much easier. So they're we got the route, and then we have to make these plans
Mm-hmm.
so that we're kind of okay. Well, this is how we're going to manage the route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, because of our trip, we're going to England, and because of Brexit, we even have to do like international immigration and all that.
Oh, absolutely. So
Yeah,
I have
so.
draft plans in place,
Mm-hmm.
and between 24 hours and 2 hours before you arrive
Mm-hmm.
in the UK, you
Mm-hmm.
have to have submitted an online.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you haven't submitted, you can also raise a yellow flag,
Mm-hmm.
and that's telling them you're coming and you haven't done the submission, but you have everything
Gotcha,
ready.
gotcha,
So, like in our case, I have a full set of literature that
gotcha.
we need
Mm-hmm.
about the boat,
Mm-hmm.
about me, the skipper, and my entitlements to do what I do,
Mm-hmm.
and about the crew, the manifest of who's on board, etc. So that's kind
Very
of
cool.
all prepared.
Very, very cool. Yeah, it seems that flags are quite important in sailing as well.
Yeah. So what the custom is for respect
Mm-hmm.
is quite often I actually have them ordered because we haven't done international trips before now.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Irish flag because
Mm-hmm.
we're based out of Ireland, and then the flags of the countries that you're going to visit. So the UK flag and the French flag.
Mm-hmm.
And the custom is as you're going into another
Actually,
country.
quick question,
Yeah.
and then you can get to the custom. For Jersey, is there a specific flag, or is that part of the UK? I'm not sure.
Jersey is a territory of the UK, even though it has
Okay.
its sort of own laws or whatever. So the UK
So you can
flag,
use a UK flag in here.
you can use a
Okay.
UK flag, and
Okay.
they're fine with that. There's probably a Jersey flag as well, but so I think it has a UK in the corner and
Gotcha,
something of
gotcha.
that nature.
Yeah, one of the classics.
It's a good question though. It'd be nice to even have it. I hadn't thought about that. If I see one, maybe I get it before the trip. But the idea then is you put the flag of the country you're visiting above your own flag, and they know, okay, well, this is a boat coming from Ireland, and they're visiting us
Yeah,
in the UK.
As a
in
sign of
France.
respect. That's all it really
It's
is.
kind of, yeah, it's a sign of respect. It's a nice thing to do.
Yeah, fair.
And it makes it very easy for everybody to know where you're from, etc.
Fair enough. Sorry if there's noise of plane.
Yeah, we have a Cessna going above us, so somebody's out for a lovely day trip on
It's a really
beautiful
nice
Cessna.
day in Ireland, actually.
Yeah, I brought you up in one of them years ago when I was in the pilot's license.
It was actually not bad. I thought it was worse. It made flying on regular planes much easier.
Yeah, because there's a lot of thermals and everything. So
like even on a really, really nice day, you'd still feel like boom, boom, boom.
yeah. So that's kind of that. I think that's all. They're the main things about the route and about the planning of what we'll do about it.
Brilliant. So then we had a little chat beforehand, and you mentioned you wanted to talk about two other main areas.
Yeah.
One of them being the crew, right?
Absolutely.
So do you want to get started with that, or is there something else you want to cover?
No, I think that's fantastic. The crew is next. At the moment, we're 4 of the crew.
Mm-hmm.
With a potential 5 or 6 if I bring potentially other sort of qualified people on board just to go for. There are 2 trips where it might be nice. One is the Milford one where we cross the Irish Sea, and the other one is the Salcombe to St Helier where we cross the English Channel.
Yeah, so the 2 kind of less safe routes.
Yeah, where there's a bigger tidal influence and you're away from land. Not that the trips are that long, but
Yeah, but if it's not that long, but we're by the coast. If anything does happen, we can just come into the coast.
Exactly.
Well, when you're out in the middle of the sea.
Yeah, exactly. I know I'm not concerned, but at the same time, these are all the considerations.
The more experience, the better in general.
Absolutely. So the crew at the way it is, we need to take care of certain things. Obviously, I'm the skipper, so I have overall responsibility.
So actually, hold on a second. I think we'll get. So my other brother is here. I think he should come for this because there's a little surprise as to what our roles are. I've heard what mine is, but I think it'd be cool to have him find out what his is live on the video.
Okay.
So he's just gonna come up because he doesn't know what it is yet. Yeah. So this is Matteo. Actually, quickly introduce yourself.
And you're sailing.
Hi, I'm Matteo. I'm Michael's brother.
Yeah.
His son.
Great.
And your sailing experience.
I sailed when I was a kid. Well, big boats.
He's the guy who started us on sailing, I guess.
I have no idea how to sail a big boat.
Yeah. He didn't even know he was coming on this trip. He just found out at the last minute. Just kind of like he found out he was going to be in this video at the last second, right?
Exactly.
He's coming on the cycling trip with me as well after. So we're doing the full trip together. These are the 2 kind of original members, and then we have different people for different, the sailing trip we're talking about now.
Okay, so the crew is going to be 4 of us. There's one more, Liam. And
my other brother. There's a lot of us,
so
you know, in the family, and that's not even all of them.
That's not everybody yet, So I have the overall plan. I've shared it with you guys, but we're actually going to go through, the key elements of it now. But one of the key elements is people need to do roles, and the roles depend on the type of journey. Now, because one of the trips, for example, is 24 hours, and some of them are even 17, 20 or whatever, we're going to have to do, if people can't stay awake for 24 hours, so we're going to have to do what's called watches at night time. So that means either myself or the first mate, that's Liam, will be...
The young one, can you believe it?
will be sort of the lead for one of the watches. Now, the way I did it on the Round Ireland, we did 4-hour watches, and we gave different people turns on the helm, because you all can helm the boat, and somewhere between a 15-minute and a 30-minute stint per person, and then cycle, because it takes a lot of concentration at night because it's dark. Well, it depends on the weather as well. If it's totally relaxed, you can even lengthen that out to an hour or whatever.
I assume you use the instrumentation a lot at night because you can't see as well.
You use the instrumentation almost totally to some degree, but if you've got moonlight and you've got stars, and depending how close you are to land, you might be able to see other features.
That makes sense.
But fundamentally, you're looking at
it's all black, right? Because I've never been out at night in the sea, right? So
and the one thing I bought recently is head torches for everybody. They're white head torches. Now, I bought one for me that flicks between, for the Round Ireland, that flicks between white and red. But what we're going to do is sort of colour them red, which actually works. We figured that out as a solution. because if you wear white headlights at night, you destroy the night vision of anybody who's looking. So you can see everything, but it's just sort of that red tint about it. You know?
Actually, slightly separate thing, but it reminded me of it. I'd heard that pirates, the reason they wear the little patch is so
Yeah.
that when they go below deck, they can see. But I assume it has some applications at night as well.
Well,
Right?
that's
I
not
don't
actually
actually
the
know.
reason.
That's not the reason.
So sextant is used in the day or at the night to navigate and know your position based on the sun, or at night based on the moon or the planets or the stars. Right there's obviously the one moon. There's 4 main planets we use, and there's 57 stars that we use for navigation at night. And I'm only learning about it now. The nighttime is fine, but in the daytime, you're potentially looking at the sun. And on the sextant is a number of filters, because if you want to get a sighting, a noon sighting of the sun, to figure out what your latitude is, you need to look at the sun through the filters. And what it means is the pirate who did it didn't have the filters on and got the sunlight straight into their eye, so they're a little bit
Blind.
not clever. So it's not actually necessarily, oh, he's an evil guy. It means he didn't use the
It's a bit
sextant
of
right,
a
or the
dunce.
filters didn't work, or whatever else it is.
Potentially.
So actually knowing that was kind of funny, and
That's-
you know,
yeah.
one of the main reasons is misuse of the sextant.
That's crazy. Because pirates were sailors, right?
Absolutely,
In the end,
absolutely.
At their core, they were sailors.
Absolutely. So something wasn't working with it. Could it be an accident or whatever? I don't know, but it basically generally means misuse of that.
Gotcha. So anyway,
Yeah,
you
so-
are the skipper.
I'm the
right?
skipper, so either myself or Liam will lead a watch. And then we'll probably, I don't see any reason not to do similar, do 3-4 hour watches starting 10 to 2, 2 to 6, and then 6 to 10. And then during the day, it doesn't matter too much. But what I'll advise everybody is, if you think you're going to be tired, or you're not even tired and you want to charge your batteries, do it before the night time if we're continuing to go. So,
Gotcha.
you know.
Yeah. So you're well rested for those.
So you're
4
well
hours,
rested.
yeah.
So we'll fundamentally be 2 teams at night, but everybody generally together during the day.
Gotcha.
But then we all need a role.
Do you have an
Yeah.
idea? So maybe it'll be after rolls. Maybe I'm jumping forward.
Yeah.
But do you have an idea as to who the teams are? Because I assume it's always the same teams because of tiredness, right?
Well, I think if we're basing it on the 4 of us, I would actually like to swap, because I'd like to sort of maybe teach a little bit as we go along the way, and I would
Gotcha.
know maybe more than
Gotcha,
Liam.
gotcha.
So I'd like to sort of swap on different nights.
So some nights I'm with you, some nights he's with you.
For example.
What part of the route are we going at night? Do you know already?
Yeah, so for example, the longest route, which is Milford from Penzance, which is 24 hours, that's going to have to be 24 hours overnight. The other ones, for most of them, we could start really early and arrive relatively late.
Okay.
So we might have some dark hours, but we mightn't be doing full overnights type thing. So our longest one, based on that plan, is 24 hours.
Which includes a night.
So
No
that
matter
means
what,
that one for sure. The other ones, we might do some sort of watch system, but it would be only for a few hours. Type
And
thing.
for anyone who's interested, because he told me earlier, the way you estimate such a thing, because there's wind and blah blah blah, is you assume 5 knots an hour, right? And
Yeah.
then based on on the mileage, you assume 5 knots an hour. That gives you the amount of time. But if you go faster, you obviously take less time. But if you go slower, you mentioned earlier that you actually use the motor to make
Yeah.
sure that you go at least 5 knots an hour in the planning.
Yeah,
phase.
so for the planning, if you want to plan, and you're never going to be exact with sailing, but you plan a cruising speed. And like on the Round Ireland was 5.5 knots. For us, I'm going to pick 5 knots.
Oh, so
And-
it's not every.
No,
route,
because
it's
different
whatever your
boats have
boat
different
is.
capability. If you went on a bilge boat, like 3 knots might be the
You
cruising
might get
speed.
lucky if you go.
You know, so it kind of, it depends on the boat you're on. But we'll say the average is 5 knots. So I'm going to pick 5 knots. And if we're sailing at 5 knots or above, the engine will be off. If we go below that, we turn on the engine so we keep our pace. Now, you don't have to do that. You could take all the time in the world and take your time and not use the engine. But if you want some sort of plan, which we're kind of looking at a plan, we're going to use that as a starting
Gotcha.
point.
It keeps you more on track and structured and everything.
Yeah. Now,
Right.
but you can also ease off if you're having a great time, whatever you
Yeah,
want
of
to do,
course.
you know.
So anyway, we keep getting distracted.
Yeah.
Back to the crew.
Back to the crew. So I was thinking about what are the things that we need to do that either myself, me as a skipper, I'll be keeping an overview on everybody and everything that's happening, kind of bit of double checking,
So in
coordinating.
a sense, final responsibility does fall on
always
you, right?
always falls back to me. For Liam, he knows how the boat works, etc. So I'll give him the responsibility of the opposite watch, and then just helping whoever's doing whatever else. An important part of keeping people happy is that they have food and drinks. So that's on a boat is called a victualler.
Yep.
So that means that person's going to have to do the shopping, the preparation before we get on or even out, and then either the cooking or the making of teas or coffees to make
Making sure that stuff is stocked up. And
yeah, and if we eat reasonably well, we're much happier. It's good for everybody.
24 hours on a boat will tire you out as well.
Yeah, so I was going to delegate that to you, Michael, because I know you like. Actually, everyone in the family likes cooking, but I just decided, okay, Michael,
But I really like it.
you're going to be the victualler. I actually, Matteo likes cooking as well. It could be just as
Are you
easy.
gonna weigh our food though?
So as I
Michael's into fitness, you know that if you're watching
this
this
is the
channel.
exactly.
I need
Yeah.
to gain weight for the bike.
Yeah.
I need to lose weight. All
All right, perfect. I'll kind of start you all on a attractive diet. I'll tell you what you can eat and not eat.
And probably a second thing, I'll ask Michael because we've been talking about this for a while.
Protein, actually.
His issue was all with it because I found this really important on the Round Island. I didn't do much with my body, and I found that my muscles were getting weak even over the 8. Because you're not doing much physical activity. I think it's healthy to have like a 15-minute thing that you do once or twice a day, just to keep your muscles moving, and maybe have a.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna make a separate video just about.
If you could do that,
I'll do on
because I think a lot of people on a small boat, they don't. They're actually muscles atrophy if they're on any sort of reasonably long voyage. And maybe you could say, okay, we've the cockpit and we've downstairs. What space or bars could we use to do a sort of a body weight
I might have
exercise?
to ask you actually, because I don't know what I can put my weight on.
Exactly. So main thing victualler, but I think a really good supplementary thing is if you sort of design an exercise for us to do. But something once or twice a day because movement is the important
once or
thing.
twice a day, so it's you actually.
But like even 10 minutes, but twice a day, so that your body is sort of not doing nothing.
Kind of like astronauts.
Huh?
Kind of like astronauts.
Absolutely. But the boat is kind of our spaceship in a way. And then secondly, for Matteo, we have what's called a nav desk down there with the charts. And you might have heard me talk about the pilot and passage plans. I want you to make them. So that means for each harbour we go out of, each harbour we go in, and the passage to actually make the plans. Now, obviously, I'll show you how to make the plans, but that also means then as we're going along, we log in the ship's logbook. This is really important. The ship's logbook is actually a legal document. Every time we make a change, for example, if the engine turns off when we start sailing, or we change course for some reason because we're going around the coast, you need to log that in. Or generally, you might do it even once an hour if you're going on a straight line, because then what you can do is based on your actuals rather than the plan, you can project to what your dead reckoning is or your estimated position is, that you're on track type thing. Now, I know we have the electronic instruments, but if that's done in parallel, the reason why it's really important is when we switch watches, that the other watch is going to have to continue that and have an exact update. Well, here's what when you switch watches, you actually need to have a handover period of a couple of minutes. Okay, here's where we got to. Here's the direction we're going. Here are the obstacles upcoming. What's going on, sort of thing. So there's a handover each watch time. And so I want you to be the sort of key person during the day and on your watch for making the logs, having the day before we go anywhere, the pilot plans for in and out and the passage plans. Now, when I say the responsibilities, is you're the main person. I'm the skipper, etc. For victualling, for the plans.
Is there a name for it actually? For
a navigator.
Navigator. Okay.
So the actual role is that of the navigator. So navigator, victualler, skipper, and first mate. They're our roles.
I'm gonna have to ask you how to spell that actually, because I want to write it down.
Sure, no problem. Now, when the watch changes, if you're on a watch with me, for example, you'll do probably both roles, or we'll agree on
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But fundamentally, I'll still stay as the skipper, and you'll go down and take the logs. I'll hold the helm, or we might agree that I do it. But fundamentally, you're key vittular. But on watches at night time, you'll do the navigation elements and take the handover from Mateo,
Yeah.
and which
And later
generally
we'll-
at night just means making a hot cup of tea.
Yeah.
You know,
cool.
like I'm saying for you, you're the key navigator. But then, if it's time when people are cold or whatever, you'll go down and do the victualling as well, and maybe make people a quick sandwich or a cup of tea or whatever else it is, you know. So they're the four roles: it's skipper, first mate, vittualler, and navigator.
And I think more importantly, when you land somewhere, you make sure there's enough food and water, right?
Yeah,
At least
absolutely.
in my case.
Absolutely. So that means you need to know how to fill the water tank, where to find a shop to go and do it. You need to be the one maybe to, come with me to the harbour master. We talk about coming in and out and any questions. And we all share that
Yeah, of
information
course,
with
of
each
course,
other.
of course, yeah.
But it's really good to have key responsibility. So then
That stuff
we're going,
happens. Right?
okay, are the plans in place for tomorrow? Is the provisions in place for tomorrow? Then I'll ask Liam or myself, what do we have or not have or need, or what conditions do we consider in the weather? Like, the plan includes looking up the weather forecast, looking at the charts, looking at the almanac. I'll go through it all.
Sure.
With
And then, given we each have our own checklist, it also takes stuff off your plate so you can make sure that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I'll be helping everybody
Yeah, of
along the
course,
way.
of
So that's
course.
kind of that's the team, Michael. So
Very cool.
for each of the 6 legs,
Mhm.
we'll have those responsibilities, and we'll get better. We'll notice how, I'll say one thing that I need to do before the first one, because I'll help with the provision and I have it on the list, and we'll go
Sure.
through it later. Is when you buy the toilet paper, put it in waterproof bags. In
I would
case
have not
things
thought
get.
of that, right?
There's loads of little
Yeah.
things I learned from the.
Also, provisions include stuff beyond food as well. Right?
Provisions means whatever is needed
Kind of-
to
Mhm.
wash, clean, toilet, eat, drink.
So living.
It's victualling is the supplies of the
Gotcha,
ship.
gotcha.
And then navigation, obviously, there's actually quite a lot of technical stuff you're going to learn about tides and everything else. So it'll be so it'll actually be an education in the way. And for me, it'll be an education because I only believe that you really get good at something not when you learn it and you can do it, but then when you can express it and somebody else can begin to do it, then you really think, oh, now I understand it. So I'm actually excited to do that with both of you. So that's the team. That's what we're going to do. I'm not sure how you're with that. You probably don't know the details of it, but that'll
We'll
be
figure it out. And then
over the
figure
next couple of days. We'll
Yeah.
I'll be giving you templates. I'll be giving you sort of
what we
list.
need, right?
Well,
But-
I won't give you everything, but I'll give you what I thought was really important, and then you might decide on whether it's pasta we're going to
Sure,
eat
sure.
or all that
No,
type
in
of
the
stuff.
sense you tell me beyond food, because
Yeah,
food
I
and
think it's
water,
beyond-
I think okay,
and the
that's
food
obvious,
you'll do that.
right?
Yeah.
But then also, if you want anything in particular, we should probably have a list of like.
So what
people
was
want.
really good on around Ireland, I'm just bringing that experience. There was a hammock-like bag on the ceiling, which I didn't think about it now, but where they put snacks like nuts and fruit and stuff like that, because people get a bit peckish
Yeah, I
along
wonder
the
if
way.
we can set something like that up.
Yeah, so I might give that to you as
Sure.
a some sort of, I don't know, it was like a netted hammock, but it was food in it instead of
Gotcha.
people. It wasn't like a people length one.
I'll see. Today we're going to Decathlon, so we'll see if.
Yeah, so things
maybe
like that
see
might
something
pop up
like
now
that.
as well. So that's the crew, and that's what you're going to do.
Brilliant, very cool. So I'm going to be counting all your calories, right? As if.
I'm on a
Make sure you
4-day
eat.
fast at the moment, so I haven't eaten in 3.5 days now. So
make sure you
yeah.
eat enough protein, as we've been over in the videos. So it's
Yeah.
good that you picked me. Or scary. I don't know. Whatever you
I
want.
don't know. Well, my concern is, can you use the gas cooker? I don't think you have here yet, so
I don't know. I think maybe once I can use
I like-
gas cookers.
Yeah,
Oh no, I did it. I used it once. I
Oh,
used
I
it
think
once.
you
I
made
did.
an omelette.
Yeah.
So I would also let
Made a load
do we
of
have a
chicken.
spare gas canister would be also even
Okay.
part of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything for the food or to make the
Yeah,
food.
actually, when you give me a list, I might post it in the description. For anyone
Absolutely,
who's
yeah.
curious.
I have a list now at the moment,
Yeah.
and that probably is continuing every day as we have some of the discussions.
Of course, yeah. Brilliant.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then, what's next? I think there was
The
one
boat.
other the boat. So
This is it. So
I'll do a recording of the boat at some point. So as he
Absolutely.
goes through, I'll put shots with my amazing editing skills.
Yeah, so on the boat there are several areas, and we actually I have an Excel on your computer that we can have a little bit of a look at if you don't mind. If you could just focus on that for a second, and I'll talk about the general areas. Maybe I can use this
Yeah,
and
sure.
scroll down. I can't see the mouse actually. Can you see the mouse? Oh, there it is. Okay, so what do I need? Documentation is really important. I won't go through everything here, but it talks about the ownership of the boat. You need that as you're going through customs, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Then anything about the boat, like I have the insurance policy because you can stay a certain amount of time in Europe, no problems. And I call them up and let them know I'm going, so there's no issues. Then there's about the skipper. So my identity, my qualifications, whether that's like first aid, VHF radio, day skipper, what I'm doing, and then any qualifications of anyone else. So, for example, Liam, competent crew, I have that in here. And generally, it's good to have a passenger manifest. So, when you come into customs, I have a one page that says all of our names, our passport number, date of expiry. So, when you go to
Make
customs,
it
you can
simple.
say, here it is, and there's even a contents page that says, here's all the things in here, and it's
Do
no
they
issue
ever
for them.
get stuff that's that organized? That
Huh?
sounds really, really organized.
I don't know. I've been asking the different skippers, so they're really good here in Dunleary of the guys helping about. Here's what you need to bring. Like for the UK, there's a guy who's literally on his way to Brest right now. He just passed the Scilly Isles. I'll give a shout out to him, Stoyan.
Sure.
Fantastic boat, and learned to sail a bit on his boat as well. I think you did, Matteo. You were on it a couple of times, and he's going in one trip all the way to Brest with a couple of friends. So Juniper 2 is the name of the boat if you want to watch it. And he's on his way there now, and
Very
he's
cool.
he's taking the braver, longer route. But it also he's been doing things that it's nice to have people doing things a little bit ahead of you because you have a chat with them. So I didn't know about the UK customs forms, for example.
Oh, that would have
Stoyan told
been
me,
fun,
or
showing up to the UK and being like, "Yeah, we forgot."
yeah, well, I would have had most of the stuff, but then talking to other people who do it, they're super helpful, and then that allows you to be prepared. You
Yeah,
know
of
what I
course,
mean?
of course. Yeah.
And then I share everything with him and some of the other captains, and we spark each other ideas of what to do. So that's documentation. Then we come on to water, which is key. We have one water tank, and we can also, if we want, buy a few 6 packs of 2 litre bottles of water as well. If we want, I like sparkling water, so that's what I'm kind of saying. That.
Maybe a secondary tank for sparkling water. Yeah.
There you go.
Real fancy over here.
Yeah, well, on the fancy boats, there's like what's called a champagne seat
Ooh.
or a G&T seat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
There you go. We need that. Right?
some people would like
Or
that.
chocolate fountain as well.
The next area is fuel. So the main sources of fuel are you've got diesel, you've also got some engine oil, and then you've got gas. But it's not really fuel for the boat; it's fuel for the cooking.
Cooking. So that's kind of more under victualers.
Yeah. I have it under fuel just because it is a fuel, but I can't. Michael, you're going to have to help me here. I can't see the mouse. So if you could just scroll down a little bit for me, that'd be great.
There you go.
Yeah, so the next is plumbing. So I've had to do something new and I've ordered it as a black water tank. So when you go into Europe, we have a toilet on board, and what you do is you flush it and that goes out of the boat.
Yeah.
That's fine to do at sea, but it's not fine to do in a marina. We generally don't do it any marina, but there's kind of enforcement of that in Europe, in France, etc. So they ask that you have a black water tank.
So there's no poop floating
Yeah, so
everywhere,
it goes into the tank, and then so if you decide to use the toilet while you're in a marina, it goes into the tank, and then when you go back out to sea, you empty it.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But what we've done so far, and we sailed with it around Ireland, is you just don't empty any of that in a marina or in a harbour. You go to
Use their toilets as well.
You use their toilets, etc. So that's kind of the plumbing element.
Okay.
The rigging element, so there's 2 types of rigging. There's fixed rigging, which is the mast, the boom, the stays. These are all the things that keep up but they're solid. And then there's sail rigging. So we have a main sail, we have a head sail, and we actually have a second head sail, and we have a spinnaker. So depending on the different types of wind, you might want to be using different head sails. So smaller ones are called jibs. Then you've got Genoas. Then you've got code zeros, and they're for going into the wind. And then when the wind is coming to your back, you'll often use maybe even a little the spinnaker or a genicker. So they're kind of like a parachute like.
Yeah.
And
They go in front.
the spinnaker is a symmetrical one, and the genicker is an asymmetrical one. So they've different.
That's the difference.
They've
Because I never
different.
knew the difference.
There's different lengths, and they've different sizes, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 according.
But you do have all those.
We were fortunate. We have a few. I haven't used many of them, so that's kind of. I as a minimum will want at least one extra sail. Even if something happens, the first one, even if we use, let's say you get a problem with it, you can replace the sail and put up a second one.
Yeah, actually, one second. If you want to go, you feel free to
I'm
go.
listening. I'm interested in that.
Okay.
Might as well know what's going on with it.
Yeah.
So the next one is safety. Now this is really important. Everything from life jackets, which is probably people are the most important thing on the boat. Life jackets.
You would hope so.
Huh?
You would.
Absolutely. And I bought us all a few life jackets, ones which have a manual open. So if you fell in the water, you manually open it.
Gotcha.
There are ones, and this is what I'm thinking from what I learned on the trip, that are automatic. Once they sense water, the gas goes in automatically. And secondly, they have a light on them. Because if you fall in at night, that light then shines automatically.
So they're for more inexperienced people as well.
Yeah, so but it's all really important at a night time that everybody has one.
The light in particular, more than the self-inflating thing.
Yeah, but then also self-inflate is probably a good idea because if you get shocked by when you fall over or whatever, it happens automatically.
Of course.
And then the other useful thing is a whistle. So that if you're in the water, you can whistle if we're close by, so it makes it easier if there happen to be high waves or anything else like that. And then the last one of those elements, which I haven't got yet, which is called a PLB, which is a personal locator beacon. So it literally has a GPS signal that sends to the lifeguard if you get wet and fall over. Now, if you do it by accident, you can call the Coast Guard and say that one was done by accident. So they're the kind of person safe ones. The life jacket, and a really important one about it is, and I've learned, which we don't have yet, are spray hoods. So if you end up in the water and it's wavy, there's a hood on the life jacket, and it actually increases by a factor of 4 you not drowning. Because if there are waves, they actually hit the hood. Like it literally comes down over your face.
Oh, okay.
Now it doesn't block your air, but as waves might hit you if you fall in rough water. Now I don't plan on going out on rough water, but I've learned all these different things around. They would be the key elements in keeping a person safe.
With these things, you could get stuck in something unexpectedly as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, I'm just giving you the info around here is the best of what you could have if you're going to do those things.
No life jackets were so, there was so much to just life jackets.
Oh, absolutely. And then we get to the boat. I guess within the boat, I'm going to look here. In terms of the boat itself, I look from the worst case going down is, do you have a life raft? And do you have what's called an EPIRB, which is it's effectively like the PLB, but for the boat. So if the boat sinks, there's this thing that actually sends up the signal to the lifeguard and you go.
Why wouldn't you use the same one as a person? Is it less strong?
All of them are optional, but that's for the boat. But like, for example, what happens if a person fell overboard? The EPIRB wouldn't go off.
Gotcha.
If the boat goes down, all 3 or 4 people are problematic.
Sorry about the noise. I don't know.
I think there's some alarm going off on a boat nearby.
Yeah, I will just continue.
Okay. Yeah, or we can let me go and do that because I think it might be this guy.
Then, go for it.
Okay, and then we can put that out. Right? We can leave it in like that. The probably either electricity is gone or he's left an instrument on.
Fair. Oh, there we go. It's done.
Okay.
Stop. Excited for the trip?
Yeah.
And then with a life raft, what I've heard recently, because I've been on courses, etc., really you only use a life raft if the boat is going down. Okay, that thing is off again. I don't know what it is with it mightn't be something we can do about anything
That's okay.
about.
I mean, we're gonna have to live with it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, this is the marina. So the life raft, it should be good and it should work for everything, but really it's a last resort. If the boat, you've more chance of staying with the boat, even if the boat is capsized but it's floating, to stay with the boat and only let the life raft go off if the boat is actually going
Gotcha.
down. That's my understanding from the different people that I've been
Well,
talking
you
about.
said there was a saying about it actually as well.
Only
For-
step up onto a life raft.
Yeah, which I think explains it pretty
Explains
well.
the whole thing. Yeah,
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 if you have to
exactly.
step up onto a life raft, you know you have problems.
And for that, you would need a grab bag as well. So a grab bag is a bag that you can grab really quickly that would have enough for whoever's on the boat for 24 hours on the boat
Yeah, yeah.
or on the life raft. They're kind of no. I think
Huh?
we could stay with a little bit more. So in term, yeah, I guess then there's also for safety at night, you have a thing called harnesses or lifelines.
Mhm.
So that's where you hook yourself to a stay like this.
Okay. Yep.
So at nighttime, particularly if you're sailing or at nighttime,
Mhm.
everyone hooks in.
Okay. In general.
In general,
Even
you just
down,
hook in.
down or up? Like
No,
down?
once you're up, once you're
Okay.
up, once you're down, it's fine. And that just, if things are sailing or moving, or that's when things can happen, particularly at night. So if you're sailing or you're out at night, in the day, generally not, unless you're,
Gotcha.
it's a
Yeah.
nighttime.
Well, it's especially because you
Unless
can't
you
see
like,
people if they fall overboard and everything at night. Right?
absolutely. So there's the lifeline is another part of it, and then there's two types of lifeline. There's one with a hook, and then there's one with two hooks.
Mm.
And the two hooks ones are better because you can always be hooked to one, hook to the next one, and release. Because if you've only one with one hook, you have that moment of risk if you swap it from one to the other.
If you don't see it coming, you never know.
Yeah, exactly. So they're the main safety elements. I'm sure there's more, but I think we've caught on them. Next comes into provisions. This
So my
is
job, guys.
yeah, my job. If you can scroll that down a little bit,
Sure.
and then because some of it's yeah, just keep it in provisions. A thing that's really important is you don't realize how burnt you might get out in the sea. Even if it's not particularly sunny, you're exposed, the wind, the sun. So I already have it here. Factor 50 is sort of really important for people.
That's
So
great.
provisions is taking care of people, we could call
Gotcha,
it, in every
gotcha.
type of way.
Gotcha.
Then it's really, does everyone have a non-spill cup? Because like a warm cup of tea or whatever. Do we have a kind of a plan for the food?
Yeah,
Generally,
actually, before you get on to
Yeah.
the food, just to clear up the non-spill cup thing you mentioned earlier, that's a lot more important than you might think initially.
sure,
Being able
yeah.
to have warm, not warm water, warm liquid in general.
Yeah, because when you're out, you get colder than you think over time. Now, obviously, we get into the passengers is you generally need to have sailing boots, salopettes, and jackets.
Mhm.
And they have different levels of them when you go to buy sailing equipment. The more offshore you go, the more they need to protect you from the wind and the rain. The idea actually of all of that material is not to keep you warm, it's wind and rain protection. And then you layer up underneath,
Gotcha.
whether that's thermals or
Well, it's
clothes.
like normal jackets as well. That's the theory behind them, is to keep you dry and
Yeah.
dry and
Yeah,
without
but they
wind
won't
or-
have warm linings or anything. They're really strong at preventing the wind getting at you. Like I have a thing called a gaiter, which is for your neck, because your neck is something that gets really exposed.
So
It's
at
something you
least
might,
a minimum scarf. Or
a
something.
fantastic hat and a gaiter, or are really helpful. Gloves and what I just described.
Gotcha, yeah.
Now that's not really part of provisions. That's part of
Well,
the
each individial person needs
each
to sort
individual
themselves out. Yeah.
exactly. But I'll let them all know that
Yeah.
these are the things that they need. Then well, I do have it there under provisions, but it was just as a reminder for me. Really, what's good is probably lunch boxes and waterproof bags to keep any of the stuff that food that might be perishable.
Okay.
And then kind of almost planned. You know what I mean? So you don't you can just plan. It might be easier while we're in a marina to cut the onions, to do this, that, and the
that
other.
sense, yeah.
And then in
Then
3
trying
hours
to do it
later,
when you're like, whoa.
yeah, because if we're sailing a lot,
Yeah.
you're using the gimbal, you're rocking back and forth in the galley, and so you kind of
It's a bit of preparation.
what you can do in prep, do the prep,
Mhm.
and then the rest you'll just do it as
Yeah.
you get it. I think they're the main things that we need to look at.
Gotcha.
Then it's on to communications.
Well, there was one more thing.
What was that?
The seasickness tablets, I heard. can
Oh,
be
yeah.
Quite useful.
Yeah, so for anyone who might get seasick, seasickness tablets can help. There's also glasses that have this sort of blue liquid that are they rock as you rock, so it's like looking at the horizon.
That's wild, I don't know. Yeah.
And what happened even on the Round Ireland, there were two experienced sailors with me who got sick on the first day. They were recovering the second, and never got sick again. So sometimes, just seasickness, it can be about the balance in your ear, because we've three canals, the one for pitch, yaw, and roll.
Yep.
And they're all the three dimensions that you can move. And
Which
for,
are, forward and back,
Yeah,
side to side.
pitch is like up and down.
Yeah.
Yawing is left to or spinning or left to right, and rolling is this dimension.
Yeah, so kind of, yeah, side to
So we've three canals in our ear, and sometimes the eye, the use of the ear, and the brain don't match, so people get sick.
Gotcha.
Go
But
ahead.
do you think usually, so kind of general advice, does it make sense to kind of see how seasick you're getting and just kind of live through it, or taking the tablet or the glasses from the very start makes sense? Like, how would you approach it for somebody who doesn't really know? Like, if somebody who knows themselves, that's a different story. Like, for example, for us, we don't know too well how we adapt to it over multiple days as well.
Okay, so I have a couple of ideas. One is I asked Monica and Liam to go to
My mother, Monica.
to the balance center, and they actually did tests on their balance in different ways. And there's nothing physically wrong with their ear canals or whatever. So whatever the issue is between vision and brain. Is kind of. So I have found I've got seasick a couple of times, but it was only when I ate too much. So when I ate too much, then I got this sort of. I never actually got sick, but I got this sort of no, and I don't get seasick at all. Like the literal is I don't. But when I ate too much, so what I would advise is people not to overeat, to kind of keep on the lower end of things, to minimize, because your body has to do two things, and it has to work with the brain, and digestion is the most energy. Probably you know more about it than me,
I
Michael.
was going to say, same thing on cycling. If you overeat and then decide to go for a cycle, trust me, from experience,
Yeah.
don't do that.
Or I used to swim a lot when you guys were competitive swimmers, and my training class was at 5 o'clock with Luca. And I would only ever, the days I was going swimming, I would only ever have a salad at lunch at like 1 or 2 o'clock, so that I was light when I was going to swim, because anytime I had. So getting your body to do too much before you go potentially sailing is probably the biggest factor.
Yeah.
And the second one.
Seasickness comes from, in a sense, like sensory overload, in a sense.
It becomes from, at least from what I understand from the doctors, a mismatch between the vision and the brain. And potentially sometimes there's a maneuver that they can do to fix the crystals in your ear as well. There can be a physical issue in your ear.
Okay. Yeah, you were saying anyway.
Secondly is keeping warm. You get cold quicker than you think. You're better off to have the extra layer on, because once you get cold, it's hard to get warm again.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So, and if your body has to deal with the vision, or the stomach, or the cold, you're pushing all these factors of the possibility of getting sick higher.
Gotcha.
And if you can look at each one of the three of them, and you're aware of them, you warm up, you kind of, if you know your tendency. And then some people, as I said, they get sick. And what the doctor said to Monica and Liam was, the best thing you can do is exposure. And then with time, you get used to it. And really, in terms of the best place for someone to get sick is to sit at the back and see the horizon.
Yeah, I remember the one time you brought me out, actually putting me at the helm really, really helped.
Because you have something to focus on, and not necessarily to be looking at something on the boat, but look at the horizon or something on the horizon.
Getcha. So then, just to kind of
Yeah.
reiterate on the question, just because you give a lot of really valuable advice, but I'm curious, would you still, so assuming you keep yourself warm, you look somewhere good, you've done your checks,
Yeah.
would you recommend trying to counteract it, or like kind of living with it for a little bit, and then only really counteracting it if 2 days in you're still getting seasick? Or would you say,
I would.
I'm getting seasick, and then instantly take your medication, and because you'll get better anyway, and the medication will just kind of stop you from feeling sick in the meantime?
This is just my personal preference.
Sure.
I'd probably go try and do the preventative measures, those three things, sitting in a good
Sure,
place
sure.
and all of that. Probably resist going downstairs. People tend to have more issues when they're in that space rather than seeing the vision. Go for the preventive, expose yourself, maybe get not great for a day or two,
Mm-hmm.
and it might pass.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't pass by, we'd say day 3,
Mm-hmm.
then take maybe some seasickness tablets, etc.
Or start using the glasses.
Start using the glasses and use the sort of, how would you say, curative methods. I'd go for the preventative first and the curative, because that exposure might just get it out of your system, like it happened to 2 guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not an answer, but that's what I
Of
would.
course, yeah.
I would
Well,
sort
you're
of
the
go.
skipper, so we have to
Yeah.
ask your experience.
So that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That's the safety elements. I think we could come on, if you could just scroll down a bit, we go on the communication elements.
I think it's here.
Yeah, I think we just need to
Yeah,
scroll a
it's
little
there.
bit. Oh, that's the last, is it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, communication, I think we talked about it. Flags. So you're letting whoever know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
The main communication you have is VHF radio. Now, VHF radio is line of sight. So that means if you go between here and Milford, there's going to be a few hours where you're not in VHF communication because it can only go line it. So you're literally out of communication with the rest of the world. Once you're out beyond, we'll say, 10 miles from the coast,
Oh, so
approximately.
not that far.
Huh?
Not really that far.
Not really that far, you know what I mean? I'll even say 10. It depends on how high your mast is, how high the mast is of another boat or of a lighthouse or well, not really a lighthouse, you're not going to commute, but a harbour or whatever. So once you're out a certain, an hour or two, you're probably then out of, so let's say,
Side.
yeah, we'll say 2 hours, you're out of, because we say 5 knots for 1 hour. Beyond 2 hours, you're probably going to have a reduced, unless you have boats, because the other boats then become relays for that communication
But
to go around.
automatically, or you can talk to them?
Automatically, because that signal sends.
Very cool. Very cool.
You know what I
actually,
mean?
didn't know.
So at least then you would at least hit another boat,
Oh, like
Yeah.
computer.
because what you're doing, well, a VHF is a broadcast channel. It's not like a telephone system, even though this has what's called an MMSI number, which is a mobile marine.
So it identifies.
It's an identifier. This has a very specific one. All the ones from Ireland start with 250.
Okay.
So you can tell where a boat is from by the MMSI number. So each country, UK have theirs, France have theirs, Italy have theirs. So that's kind of the key communication. Then the next one is AIS. So it's the automatic identification system, where on the chart plotter or on navionics or marine traffic, I can look at the area we're in, press on a boat, and know everything about that boat, where it's going, where it's come from, the key things about it, its size, things like that. So that's kind of a really important for nighttime, because you monitor the charts in the AIS to know, oh, am I on any potential collision courses or near collision?
Gotcha. Yeah. So
you know,
taking other people into account.
Yeah,
as
there's a
well.
term called the CPA, which is the collision proximity. I forget what the A stands for. And it says the closest we come to that boat is half a mile, 2 miles, or
okay.
whatever. So once you don't see the CPA reduce below, let's say, a mile, then you can kind of, well, we can keep our course. But the important thing then is, if it's anywhere coming close, to change, to give them, even if you don't talk to them, to or what you can do is go on channel 16, which is the one that everybody listens to, and then you switch to other channels for very specific needs.
So what's the radius? Yeah.
It's the same as VHF. It's line of sight.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So when
But
people,
they use the same
They use effectively the same aerial.
Okay, yeah, aerial. That's
Now, if you do want to go
gonna say
beyond
antenna.
that,
Does
you
that
can
make any
get a
sense?
satellite phone,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay.
and people are starting
Mm.
to do that. Or if you want internet, like what we've invested in, but for while we're in marinas, because it
Could
works.
you? So
Where we
we
use
have
it,
Starlink, by
yeah,
the way, just to
yeah,
make
yeah.
that
But
clear.
Starlink works off 240 volt, which is AC,
Mm-hmm.
and that means onshore power. So we can't use
Mm.
it while we're
Okay.
at sea unless you have what's called an inverter. An
Mm-hmm.
inverter translates 12-volt power to
Mm-hmm.
240 power, and then you could use your laptop or
Okay.
whatever
Yeah,
while
yeah,
you're
yeah.
at sea.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they're the kind of key communications. I also just got us an extra mobile VHF radio. If
Uh-huh.
anything happens to batteries on the boat or whatever, I have a handheld one which has the same thing and a couple of extra batteries in
Okay,
case as a
so it
backup.
just has less range, I assume. That's the big thing with it.
Yeah, because obviously the height of the aerial or whatever, but it's very sufficient for
Yeah, yeah.
maybe if you want to come into a marina, you have a problem with your main one, you've got this as a backup.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Yeah. Pretty good.
And they're the communication, and they're the main areas. And I didn't go into all of them, but like I have a couple of things that I need to check is the echo sounder and the instruments and the first reef. I need to put a line in it. That's kind of rigging stuff that I need to check.
Mm-hmm.
They're the main elements of things of the boat.
Actually, do you want to give any details on the boat itself while you're at it?
Yeah, this boat is a 32-foot boat, Beneteau, first 325, was made in 1988. It has a kind of, how to say, skinny hull in the ends and fat in the center. That means that when it turns heel sideways, it has a longer water line. And the water line is a determiner of how fast boats go. So race boats tend to have a fatter center because
Which
they
is
measure
so
the
counterintuitive.
they measure the water line normally when you're flat in a marina, but race boats then kind of get around a rule. I think it's because of the IOR. When they turn sideways, the water line gets longer, which means that they can act. The hull speed is actually faster than it would appear if it was in a marina.
Smart.
Still learning a lot about the boat. It's a tiller boat, which kind of makes a big difference.
Yeah, with people who haven't driven boats before, I guess, definitely have an interesting time because it works in the opposite direction of where you're going. Which once you figure it out, it's actually very, very intuitive.
Yeah.
But it can take a second to figure out as
Didn't
well. Right?
Bendemeer also have an interesting history?
Yeah, it's had some owners, and it's actually very well known around Ireland because it's won quite a number of races. The exact details I don't know, but
Yeah.
sometimes people come up to the boat and they know the boat, but they don't know me. So
Yeah,
it's,
so he needs to live up to the boat, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not the
So
other way around.
I feel like a super inexperienced person who's got a very experienced boat. That's
Very good.
yeah.
I
And it
didn't
works
say
fantastic.
it, but we are on the boat that
Oh,
we
yeah.
will be sailing on, right?
Absolutely. And I'm kind of happy. I did one more thing before I did those courses. I did my first solo sail about a month ago now, which meant I took the boat completely out on my own and sailed the boat in the Dublin Bay, etc. And the great thing about that for me as learning to be a skipper is I need to know how to do everything in exactly what order. So then when I'm working with a team, I know exactly what order, because if I had to do it on my own, it's become a clearer process.
Now, in short, he's telling me that I don't need to do anything the entire trip
No,
because he can do it all,
no,
right?
no, no.
That's what I got out of that.
And the tougher the weather, the more the team is important.
Of course,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? And then have fun along the way as well. Share the experience.
Good. Today's a really, really calm day. It would actually been lovely to start sailing on a day like today, you know?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Speaking of weather, right?
Absolutely. And so, yeah, one of the things, and Matteo, this will be your responsibility, but we'll all be looking at it, is looking at the weather and the forecast. We mightn't go out if the forecast is going to set up certain criteria for, okay, if it's beyond a certain 25 knots of wind or the sea state, the waves are too high, we might say, well, you know, we can wait this out and then go when it calms down a little bit.
So then, yeah, so you've mentioned in the past that at the beginning you just look at the wind and then you found out a little bit about tides. Now, what are the current things you consider when looking at a forecast? Because it's not just the wind, right? So what else do you think about?
Okay, so the wind is probably primary.
Mm-hmm.
The second might be the sea state, which is the height of the waves. So even if the wind is comfortable sailing, there might have been wind in the past few days, so there might be still quite high waves. It's called the sea state is what they call it. So the swells or the waves are quite high, which means you're going up and down all the time. Another factor then is the rain as well. It can get really uncomfortable if
Yeah.
you're just being rained on.
Of course.
So they would be and obviously then the tide as well. So depending on where you're going, the tide has a bigger influence. We're on the east coast of Ireland, so it's quite a tidal area.
Sure.
And where we're going, the English Channel is kind of one of the more tidal areas in the world even. So
lucky us.
so lucky us, but it also means, one for the passage, you need to know it in a certain way, and particularly when you're going in and out of harbours as the tide changes. But like I talked about deep marinas earlier on, that's a really important factor. So when I look at the weather, those would be the 4 key factors. Now there are others, but
So it's just to say all in one go. It's wind, waves, tide, and rain.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the main things.
Those are the main thing. And just to kind of go a bit beyond that, you look at the bigger isobar map, which shows the highs and lows, because the highs and lows, all pressure moves from high to low. So the bad weather is at low, the good weather is at high. So when you're watching
that explains so
the
much.
movement of weather charts and you see loads coming towards you, you know bad weather is coming. Or if the wind is an effect of the low. So let's say
Well, it goes high to low. Everything goes high to low.
Yeah, so if you watch the low, you can tell what direction the wind is going to be, because it's going to be circling. If you're in the northern hemisphere anti-clockwise, or in the southern hemisphere the opposite, you can tell the direction of the wind by watching the pressures and how they're moving.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. You just explained to me when I was a kid, when I'd find out, oh, it's high pressure, and it would be like a really, really sunny day, and I never knew what that meant.
Yeah,
and now you've just explained it.
And it's the
really
same
cool.
about the clouds as well. You've got the sort of high, medium, low.
So
and
you
you've
want
got
high
the fluffy
pressure.
and the flat clouds. And they actually tell you what the weather has been and what it's going to be.
So you don't talk about clouds and sun and that. You said if you want high pressure, and then the rest comes with it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Very
absolutely. High pressure is good weather, basically.
Very cool. Very cool. Very good to know. Very good to know.
They're the main factors, unless we start to do a course, which we're kind of going to do on the trip,
Well,
and that's why I want to have these conversations, because there's a lot below each one of those points on the Excel or things we got to do. So
I think there'll be a
hopefully
lot
that
to
was
it. Yeah.
insightful to what you're going to do.
Thank you very much for coming on here.
Yeah, delighted to do it.
To my subscribers at Seagod, and
How you doing? Very nice to meet you. And,
Yeah.
I hope you can get as fit as him, because he's always like, they say the generation next stands on the shoulders of the father, but he's gone like a jump ahead with terms
Well,
of
you got to use
even
them to
fit.
jump, right, like a diving board.
Yeah. And Matteo in the running space, I could nearly say them the same. So, nice to see them getting so fit and to have an adventure together.
Yeah. So thank you, and I'm excited to go with both of you and Liam. He'll probably show up in a video at some point.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. I think that's it. Unless there's anything else you want to.
No, that was brilliant. We got a great day, and now go get ready.
Thank you.